Quantum Waves, the new science of quantum consciousness. Hosted by me, Suzanne Ross. Mark Fiorentino has written a masterful book called Master of Reality, Super Relativity, the Unified Field Theory. His book is all about his journey to discover the truth about how the universe really works. His journey started when he was just 10 years old and discovered Albert Einstein and his quest for the unified field theory. Now, 55 years later, in his book, Master of Reality, he invites you to join him on the adventure of a lifetime, which is the discovery of the theory of everything. His book is about his scientific and spiritual research into Albert Einstein's dream of a unified field theory. Within his book is a full scientific explanation for how the universe works. He provides answers that explain the foundational physics of our physical universe. Mark Fiorentino was born in Somerville, New Jersey on March 14th, the same birthday as his personal hero, Albert Einstein. The book Master of Reality contains not only the completion of Einstein's unified field theory, it also contains an explanation of how UFOs work and the alien technology they use. There's also controversial topics such as near-death experience revelations that are linked to the theory of super relativity and the theory of everything. There are many highly controversial topics covered in his book that concern a new paradigm shift in physics. Here's the list of breakthrough scientific concepts and discoveries stemming from the creation of the theory of super relativity. The discovery of the origin of mass, gravity, and inertia. The discovery of the signature of God, mass-generating geometry. The breakthrough discovery that properly explains star formation. All stars have neutronium cores. The discovery of the slip wave, the method of particle motion. The explanation of how to create an anti-gravity field. The discovery of how to break the light speed barrier. The explanation of the three true primary forces of nature. The explanation of how to build a slipwave spatial bias drive. The technology of the supercar is explained. The description of the stellar converter, which is a new high-powered technology for tapping the power of black holes. A global warming solution, Project Sunshade, a technology solution for stopping global warming. The establishment of the Global Space Defense System using Stargate technology, a new technology that can be used to travel to different time and space dimensions. Fasten your seatbelt as we go on a fascinating journey through time, space, and beyond. Welcome to part 2 of Master of Reality with author Mark Fiorentino.
You were born on Einstein's birthday.
That's true.
And you discovered this because when you were a child, a teacher asked the students to find a saint that was born on their birthday. And in the absence of the internet that we have today, you were able to do some research and discover Einstein was born on your birthday, and then using an encyclopedia, started to research about Einstein and became very fascinated at a young age about his work that just seemed to make sense to you.
Yes, that's exactly right. You might say I kind of, just fell in great admiration and respect and love for him, his genius, his work and his ideas. I am sure, was the most intuitive person in the world of science. Now, in this time and back then, there's nobody that gets any closer to the truth than he did. All of my work, I stand upon his shoulders and that of Maxwell and Newton and Faraday and Lorentz. These guys all had the right stuff. They all were heading in the right direction, and was all basing their work around something called the ether, which basically is saying that space is one single thing, the fundamental field. And yes, I admire Einstein greatly. He, oh, I'd like to say more, but
He
yes,
came through in a psychic reading that you had, right? I'm saying it. You've said it before on interviews, so.
Yeah, I did a couple of times. I went out on a limb. It's true. It's a part of my personal experience. You can either accept it or not. I'm not here to make
I believe it. Yes.
Anything. It's just something that happened that surprised me.
Yeah.
And he gave me some great compliments, and he said he's been helping me, and it all makes sense. And he identified that it was him because inadvertently, what I had done when I was writing the book, I remember thinking to myself, everything I'm reading about you and what you're saying about gravity seems to imply that gravity, quite simply, is a contraction of space. So I started looking all over, looking for words where he used the word contraction and gravity in the same paragraph, in the same line of thought. And I did find it. And it's actually in his happiest thought, which I have a little excerpt here of. And he talks about gravity is indeed a contraction of space. So I hadn't quite realized that, and now I have it underlined and everything. But what the medium said in the reading right off the bat, the first thing when Einstein came through, she said, "Why is Einstein doing this? He's doing this." And I knew immediately, oh, he's answering the question I had all these years about gravity. It's a contraction of space. It's in the special relativity. That's where the idea of contraction of space really started. And so I said, oh, my God, she really is talking about. Oh, who would guess that out of the blue? Only somebody who says, I got this opportunity to get the message through to him. Let me show him, and he'll know what I'm talking about. And I did. So that for me was proof positive, rock solid evidence that they heard me. You know, the other side hears you, your spirit guides, your angels, God hears prayers. You know, they can all hear these things, and if they can get the message through, if it's allowed, you know, they'll do it. And that's what happened in this case. And it was very inspirational to me, that reading, because at that time I just thought the book was a lot of good ideas. And I said, well, I'll give it a go, but, you know, and I'll print it and I'll get it out there, and then we'll see what happens. But they confirmed that the theory itself is actually correct. And I was shocked to hear this, because I'm basically, how do I put this? Just an ordinary guy. But yet, somehow, as an ordinary person, I have managed to achieve an extraordinary accomplishment. And now it's up to me to communicate that accomplishment, get people to understand the meaning of all this and how it could help the world. And so here we are on the adventure, trying to make that happen.
And another thing that inspired you was just going out in nature and seeing these intelligent patterns. And it's so interesting, because when I started to awaken on my path and became very interested in the true nature of reality and how these intelligent patterns showed up in form, I headed out and looked for a repeating pattern in nature and discovered the spiral. And it just became so apparent to me that the spiral is really the most fundamental pattern of creation. And then I started to discover the Fibonacci sequence and the golden mean spiral.
Yeah,
Talk about
yeah.
how the patterns in nature inspired you to know that this is an intelligent design.
Yeah, I mean, I found clues that were left behind by nature and the masters in physics, and I understood their meaning. Over a lifetime of study, I was able to discern a subtle embedding of a pattern in nature, and I was able to determine its significance. And let me give you an example of something that I discovered, what I call my happiest thought. You know, there's Einstein's happiest thought. Well, I had one too. When I figured out for myself how gravity worked, why certain particles had mass and others didn't. And it was so simple. I was astounded by the simplicity and the beauty of this concept. And it matches what Einstein was saying many years ago, but nobody ever made that cosmic mechanical connection. So here's the pattern. We have the standard model in physics. It has many, many particles. Almost all of them have a certain amount of mass, some more than others. This is a mystery. The one that doesn't have any mass at all is the photon, the particle of light. And it's massless. And then I said, well, wait a minute, you know, I'm thinking about this at work, staring at the chart, the standard model chart. And then it just suddenly hit me. It's about the way it moves. All these other particles are unbalanced charges. What does that mean? It means that they have angular momentum. They're always kind of moving like this way, and that's accelerated motion. Remember that. That's important to understand and realize. They all have accelerated motion, therefore they have some degree of mass and must be coming from accelerated motion. And Einstein said that acceleration and gravity are the same thing. So that fits with his description, his realization, which Newton also realized. Force equals mass times acceleration. There's that mass with acceleration in the formula itself. And so I realized the photon wasn't moving in an accelerated manner. It was going in a straight line, linear, at a constant rate of speed. And therefore, it generated no mass. So the key was anything that accelerates, and this is a form of acceleration, not just your, you know, in a car going faster and faster, that's one form, but there's circular, uniform acceleration. And that's what the particles use. And when particles move this way, space in and around that particle contracts. There's the mechanical connection. And he even says this. So let me further back up the link. I'm telling you now that balanced charges move in a straight line. So it's the structure of the particle that determines whether it's going to have mass or not, because it determines the way it moves. And whenever you move in a constant rate of motion in a straight line, you have zero mass. So the photon is said to have zero charge, but in reality, it has an equal amount of positive and negative. So even the way they describe that particle today is incorrect. They keep saying the photon has no charge. No, the photon is nothing but charge. It just has a balanced amount. So the meaning of zero here, not zero, nothing, it's not that meaning, it means balance. So stop adding the +1 to the -1 and getting zero. You should describe the photon as +1, -1. And they don't cancel out in this case, they don't add, but that's another topic. The basic principle, what I've given you here, the photon generates no mass because of the way it moves. And it's a constant, non-accelerating motion. And when you link that to what Einstein, his happiest thought, which was this. Einstein followed the line of reasoning that began with his happiest thought of his life. Still at the Swiss Patent Office, he concluded he conducted one of his famous thought experiments. Einstein imagined a circle spinning in space. See, it's connecting to my idea, right? The center of the circle did not move, but its circumference was moving quickly in a circular direction. Einstein compared what happens in several reference frames, a standard tool that he used in developing the special relativity theory. Now, underline this in your mind, what I'm about to say, bold it. He concluded, using his special relativity, that the boundary of the disk contracted as it spun. There was a force acting on the circle at the boundary, the centrifugal force, and its action was analogous to that of the gravitational force. But the same contraction that affected the outer circle left the diameter unchanged. Thus, Einstein concluded, in a way that surprised even him, the ratio of the circle to the diameter was no longer pi. He deduced, in the presence of a gravitational force or field, the geometry of space was non-Euclidean, which means it bent. And what I'm saying, it contracted. And once that happened, it was no longer a square grid of even forces around. That whole of space is pulled inwards. It's contracted. So all I'm saying is this is how the particles do it. Agree with what he says there, and I take the scale of it from being a large scale object like a rotating disk, miniaturize it into something you get that looks like this. The trefoil pattern. Inside of the neutron and the proton, this is how they're moving. And this is what I got from the NDE person that I have in my book. Those quarks that are inside of the neutron or proton are moving like this. This is what binds them, and this is what causes a gravitational field, their motion. So it all fits together. It all makes sense. There is no loopholes and no contradictions in this theory. It comes basically from Einstein. I just finished connecting the rest of the dots in this picture. I extended the theory just a little bit more to accomplish this. And this is what he was trying to prove when he died. He just didn't know about the quarks in that time. It was just coming into light, and it was 9 to 10 years later before they actually discovered them after his death. Had he been born 50 years later, he would have worked all this out, because he was trying to create a model not knowing what was going on inside of neutrons and protons. He had many different ideas, things that are twisted and convoluted, and he was trying to work on the math. But this is the system. This is my happiest thought. A pattern to be recognized. It was a simple pattern and subtle embedding right in the standard model that they've really never noticed. And when they do notice it, they absolutely refuse to accept it.
Why do you think that is?
I've given that a lot of thought, because I want to know how they think, why they think that way. Why, one person believes this and another person believes that. Well, it all comes from a series of debates that happened when Einstein and Niels Bohr argued about quantum mechanics and classical physics and field theory. And Bohr won, not because he was right, but because he was able to slip out of every trap that Einstein put forth in trying to expose that quantum mechanics is incomplete. The theory of it, the interpretation is wrong. Not necessarily the math, but it's based in probabilities. But people in this time, physicists in this time, have allowed themselves to accept that since the math here gets stuff right, and when these big experiments with millions of measurements, somehow that math is magically making something happen, a model, a physics that's not understood. And they're saying, we don't care anymore about that. We don't care that we can't explain it physically. We're just going to accept that since these equations work for these types of experiments, that somehow it's just right and we just don't understand it. And The fact is we shouldn't bother understanding it. Reality isn't real, and they just keep skittering away from logic and sense in this other direction, and they will just declare, no, don't think like that. A particle doesn't have a path. A particle doesn't have a position. Particle doesn't exist until you look at it. All of these nonsensical things Einstein had a problem with. Of course, a particle has a path. You can see it in a cloud chamber when they're zipping around in there. You can see they have a path and a position, but yet they refuse to accept that. So why do they feel that way? Well, because their teachers have taught them this paradigm, this particular philosophical viewpoint for physics, and they use the math. And basically, as Richard Feynman said, he said, shut up and calculate. Stop asking these foundational questions. And it's been something I know I'll have problems with and I'll encounter in the future. I'll have to have discussions with physicists about that. But there are some that are open-minded, and I have communicated with some of them, and they're on the forefront of gravity research. And that's why I'm working this paper up now. That's probably going to take me another month or two to finish. But it gives me hope. There are some out there with an open mind and are willing to hear about these ideas. So I have to present them in a concise way, and connect all the dots, and hopefully they accept the arguments, philosophically speaking. And there is some math involved, but you know, it's just a matter of how they were taught. Physicists were taught, and I love them. I loved all of them, even if they yell at me and disagree. It's not personal. None of this is personal, and I refuse to take attacks personally. It's just a matter of getting to the truth, and I think I've got it. So now I've got to express it to them, and this is all I can do, is to testify, give testimony to the facts and the knowledge, and I do that in the book, and I'm doing that on this show. And hopefully the minds of some of these folks in authority will say, hey, we should give this some opportunity to flourish. There are people like at the Perimeter Institute who will be very interested, and I will contact them when I have a finished document. The book is too general. I think I need a more specific document. So that's basically why. They just have been trained to not accept this way of thinking, this philosophy of science.
And so you talked about a concept that I've often pondered, and it's about the buckyball experiment, and that particles only turn into form when there's an intelligent observer. Otherwise, they're a wave, this wave-particle duality. Can you expand upon that?
Yeah. All of our physical reality, as I have been able to determine it, and part of that comes clearly from NDEs, not only the trefoil pattern that's inside of the neutron and the proton, but I've read many NDEs, some of which I have on my site. Father Rick Wendell in particular, but there's Howard Storm was another one. There are several out there. You know, when I listen to NDEs, I'm looking for patterns, agreement on certain things, and time again, God comes forth, including Lynn Claire Dennis's experience, that the Lord God, whatever you want to call him, the universal giant spirit, the everything of everywhere, says, I am the one that created the laws of physics. They are immutable. I created everything, the constants, the physical laws, the dimensions, everything. It's, and he even tells Lynn Claire that I am the thing that forms mass, the energy that forms mass. He's clearly saying that, yeah, I created the universe. This is my creation. And not only this universe, but all the universes. So we humans want to centralize everything to us. The Earth is the center of the universe. No. The it's always the humans are the only ones. They're the center. You know, that's his old primitive thinking. We are the center of something. All humans, every human that exists, is at the center of God's attention. Every grain of sand, everywhere on every planet, on every universe, everywhere is at the center of God's attention. Every atom, all the forces of nature that make up this universe in all other dimensions are all at the center of God's attention. Now that's inconceivable for us to get a handle on as finite, limited beings. But when you get to the other side, they make it clear. It's very possible. You have a knowing of everything all at once, being connected to the universal force, the universal God. And that's how matter and energy are just, it's like a cosmic ballet. I see now things as they are. They're all spinning and rotating and dancing and bouncing and interacting with each other in a very deterministic and predictable way. But they're so chaotic, so complex, we can't really make the math to predict even some of the simplest, smallest particle interactions. That's not because that's not the way it works. It's just too complicated. There's too many things to compute to, you know, make a simple prediction. But it's a beautiful machine work, as Newton once said. That's really the way the universe, and that's the way it was designed. And you go to the creator, as these people have in NDEs, and he makes it clear that he's the one. So if we understand more about God, the spiritual realm, and the afterlife, like you're doing on your shows and other shows, we'll have more knowledge. We will get knowledge. That's what it's all about. Not just getting, you know, belief systems and so forth. We're looking for the real thing, the truth, what's really happening here. And that's the way the universe works. It's a machine work designed by a supreme being, and it makes sense. And we have to get away from the idea that it's all random, and this, which is basically what quantum mechanics theory states. It's just the way it is, though.
Stay tuned for part 3 of Mark Fiorentino's fascinating series based on his book, Master of Reality. Thank you for tuning in to Qauntum Waves, the signature series on our channel, Qauntum Waves, the new science of quantum consciousness, right here on Sci-Spi.tv, merging science and spirituality to give us answers to the greatest mysteries of creation.